Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Reverse Shot Happy Hour for January 13th, 2021. My name is Eric Hines. I'm curator of film at Museum of the Moving Image. And this is, by my count, the 34th Reverse Shot Happy Hour. We started on May 8th, 2020, and we've missed very few weeks. In fact, last week was one of the first weeks that we've ever missed because of some significant things happening in our country. And those things continue to be going on this week, but we felt it was really important to continue and to gather again today for the last Reverse Shot Happy Hour for the time being. We'll figure out what our next steps are in terms of the form we'd like to come back to you in, and how often that might look, what that might look like in terms of frequency and the nature of the program. That's sort of up to our hosts to sort out in the coming weeks. But your enthusiasm and your sort of sticking with us during this time certainly shows the value of doing this and to gathering with you during these days. And we will be back in some form. But I wanted to note that the continuity since May 8th, we started with I think our opening song with Loverboys Working for the Weekend. And I think we've improved in terms of our opening songs since then. In fact, I think I'm going to share for those of you who've been tracking this, I'm going to share a Spotify playlist that contains the films that we've been, I'm sorry, films, here we are. It contains the songs we've been hearing in terms of the intro and the outro for the happy hour. I'll do that at the end of the program. But just wanted to quickly mention a couple things in terms of Museum of the Moving Image. We are opening a couple films in our virtual cinema, A Casa, My Home film that premiered at Sundance Film Festival, won the cinematography award for world documentary. It's a fantastic film that opens this week, and also opening this week is a series called Lynn Sachs Between Thought and Expression, curated by our own Edo Choi, assistant curator of film at Museum of the Moving Image. And that is an amazing 5-film retrospective of Lynn's previous work in terms of work basically starting over the last 35 years, three programs of shorts, 2 features, as well as her brand new film about a father who. And we're so happy to be working with Cinemaguild and Canyon to put this together. And anyway, it's a great program, and it's going through the end of the month, and it starts today. There's a great conversation between Edo and Lynn that happened in our building, actually, one of the first things we've been able to do back in the building. That is part of that package. If you don't mind, it's worth it. If you don't mind sort of going ahead and purchasing that series, that's a great bonus there that you get to see the 2 of them in conversation. Anyway, we're thrilled to have that and thrilled to be working with Lynn on that. And there's also an interview in Reverse Shot, actually, that just posted yesterday, I believe, which maybe they'll mention here in the program to come. Anyway, big program today, a lot of things going on. It's going to be a little bit longer, so please stick with us. It'll be worth it. Especially when you see what's going to start at the top of the hour. And so, without further ado, I'd love to introduce the hosts of the Reverse Shot Happy Hour, my friends Michael Koresky and Jeff Reichert, the editors and founders of Reverse Shot, and Farihah Zaman, a longtime contributor and filmmaker.
Eric, thank you, as always, for that wonderful intro.
Hi.
Hey, Farihah. Hey, Jeff.
Hey, everybody. So before we dive in, we just wanted to take a second to thank Eric. We thank him at the top of every week, but I think we should take a special, an elongated thanks, because Eric did come to us, I think it was in early May, and said, what if we did something like this, like a happy hour? I think you even called it a happy hour in the first email. And we said, well, what would that mean? What would we do? How would it work? And none of us knew. But I think one of the things that Reverse Shot has always been about has been experimenting with new ways to deliver kind of conversation and community around movies, cinephilia, et cetera. And so we kind of jumped in, and then all of a sudden found ourselves producing a live show for 34 weeks. And it's actually been really fun. And so I just wanted to say thanks, Eric, for kind of pushing us to do this and creating a space where this could happen.
Knowing that it would be worthwhile, knowing that the world would want to see the 3 of you leading a discussion every single week was the easiest part. The other ones are doing the hard thing every week. And it has really, really been quite a thing to pull off. This is not a normal format. It's not talk shows or happy hours or whatever you want to call it are not necessarily where you started in terms of Reverse Shot for all 3 of you, but you've adapted to it and made it something incredibly unique. And I think that people really have appreciated it over time. So anyway, thank you for doing it. Thank you for being game for it.
You turned our toast to you back on us, and now we're going to actually toast you because you deserve a moment at least, Eric. Thank you. And all while helping keep Momi running a drive-in that like lifted people's spirits throughout several months of bleak COVID pandemic life. We really appreciate you. Thanks, Eric. Cheers.
I'll see you guys in a little bit.
Yeah, so it's been a ride. I wanted to kind of make it known to the viewers that, you know, we do hope to come back in some form. This is a self-imposed exile. We're
all just very dramatic and appreciate self-flagellation. So
well, just so people know, like, you know, we have been doing this basically every week since May, and it's been pleasant and a wonderful experience, but it's also been at times a challenge, and we just need a little reset, a little break. So It's not more complicated than that.
Yeah, no, but we really appreciate everybody who's come. The people who've been here week in, week out. It's been surprisingly fun. I didn't know what to expect when we went into this, but
wow, thanks a lot, Jeff.
Oh.
I hate talking to you guys about movies every week.
Well, so we have an amazing show. We have amazing guests, and let's mention them at the top because we are going to do something else first before we bring them on. We are absolutely thrilled to have two of the most wonderful writers, the most wonderful film people, the most wonderful film and food people, and people who have been on the show before. And we're so happy to have back today. And that would be Mayukh, the James Beard Award-winning food critic and film critic, and who's also written for Film Comment and Reverse Shot, and Andrew Chan, who's the web editor at the Criterion Collection, and who used to work at BAM, and who everyone in the community knows and loves. So we are very excited to have Andrew and Mayukh on, and we will bring them on in a little bit. But first, we have some other business to attend to.
Yeah, so what is the business? Is there something we're going to do special at the top of the show? I don't know. Should we like count down the best movies of the year or something like that? I don't know. Is that a good idea?
I think maybe.
I mean, because the theme this week is about celebrating and indulging, I think it feels good to celebrate the movies that we loved.
So let's explain a little bit about, first of all, what we're seeing, Jeff, and also the way that we came about this list. But maybe you should start with the artwork that you were looking at.
Yeah, so we are lucky in that we had countdown artwork designed for us by Academy Award winning filmmaker and rising watercolorist Stephen Bognar, who is lurking out in the audience with Julia Reichert listening right now. So in between the stills from the films that we've chosen for our top 10, you'll see original art by Steve, which is we think is really beautiful and fun.
And Steve actually appeared in episode 2 or 3 of the Reverse Shot Happy Hour, I think, and talked about the process of watercoloring becoming part of a way of responding to pandemic life, but did refuse to show any artwork. So this is a very suspenseful contribution and a long time coming.
And I'm sure it will be the most exciting thing that has happened to Steve in the last 12 years of his life. It was not winning an Academy Award with Julia Reichert, and of course, someone else.
No, it was this moment. It's just been a long drum roll.
So the list itself, as always, this is the first time we've ever presented it this way, of course. But the list, as always, was determined by polling the major Reverse Shot contributors over the past year, people who have written for the magazine, people who have written about new films for the most part, but also written about older films. And, we gave people the option of not doing it because a lot of people felt like in 2020, they hadn't seen enough. It was a very unusual year in terms of distribution, in terms of exhibition. And so because of that, we also changed the rules a little bit, where we usually only make films eligible if they have been technically released in some traditional format by a distributor. This year, we allowed the voters to also include, in addition to those films, to also include films that made their world premieres in 2020 at film festivals online or in virtual cinemas online. So there are some films in here that technically will be coming out next year in some form, but the way that we watch and the way that we take in film and the way that film is distributed and exhibited is just so different now. We felt that it was important to make that distinction.
Yeah, so should we do it? I mean, I wish we had a drum roll.
Well, I should also say that we're going to have the full article posting tomorrow with amazing writing by 10 or maybe 11 reverse shot writers. So look for that. We will of course put that out in our social media channels. So we'll have, this is really just a taste. It's all about the writing.
Yeah, so and bear with us. We've never done a screen share Google slide presentation on the happy hour before, so we're experimenting here, but let's hope this works. So weighing in at number 10 on the reverse shot, best films of 2020.
Oh my God.
so much drama already.
I actually really love it when we have ties. It's been since 2016 since we've had a tie, I think, but I think it's you know, we are very particular about the numbers, and it's you know, sometimes it just works out that way, that ties happen, and it always feels nice to when other movies kind of enter conversation in these lists with other films in the same slots. I think it's kind of fun. So should we click over to the first number 10 film?
Sure.
Kiyoshi Kurosawa's To the Ends of the Earth.
And Ryan Swen is happy about that. I can see in the chat. Yes.
People love a countdown.
I love a countdown too.
This one was, I mean, for me, I was really excited about this. It was the last film I saw that counted as a 2020 movie. I watched it before voting, and I just kind of fell in love with it.
It was something I saw a long time ago because it was at New York Film Festival last year. So got to see it theatrically. That does make a difference in terms of, you know, sometimes of my enjoyment level, though there are many films this year that I saw on screeners at home. I think this is an incredible movie. If people have a chance to watch it, what happened?
All right. My mouse moved.
If people have a chance to watch To the Ends of the Earth, and again, we're going to put the full list up after, so you remember the titles. This is a really a unique film that I wouldn't really want to spoil, but very much about dislocation and isolation, and there's an incredible scene with the carnival ride that I think every day.
And so the second number 10 film is Malmkrog, which I remember Michael watching for the New York Film Festival and saying, "Oh my God, you have to see Malmkrog. It's so amazing. It's 3 hours of people talking. It's so good. You're gonna love it." And I put it on one morning at like 7 a.m. and it was just, it's the command, the control, the ideas. It's also incredible, and it has one of the greatest sort of mid-film breakdowns and resets that I can remember in recent film history.
And if you haven't seen it yet, I do think it's a particularly good time to watch because it's just, you feel completely immersed in this film. It like consumes you.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it. And I won't say much more because I wrote about this one for the top 10. I find it to be a very upsetting, scary film in a lot of ways. It really is just conversation, but nothing scared me more. But I was so completely mesmerized by it. It's sort of a controversial film because of some idiotic remarks that the director made at a film festival, but he really is. He's one of the masters of contemporary cinema. And this is an amazing film.
Okay, so moving along to number 9. I wish we had a drum roll of some sort.
And I can't do that with my tongue. I don't know how.
Well, this is a film that I think a lot of folks will be familiar with. It's had more distribution than I think a lot of the movies on this list, and it is First Cow.
First Cow.
We probably all saw at New York Film Festival 2019, I think. And then it was starting to get released right around the time that the pandemic happened. Didn't even open in theaters for a couple of weeks before they shut it down and planned to reopen it this fall, which obviously never happened.
Yeah, directed by Kelly Reichert, we have to say, who has turned up many times on the reverse shot top 10 lists. Her previous film, Certain Women, is actually my favorite of hers. But this is a beautiful film, and it's something I've thought about a lot.
There's so many movies that get this critical response of like, wow, never have I seen male friendships depicted in this way. And I think that there's so little range in that arena that just a drop of that or hint of that garners that response. But this movie deserves that response. It's really deep and lovely and like gets into friendships in a way that the intensity of friendships in a way that people don't always show, in addition to how wonderfully it's put together.
Agreed. So after First Cow, we come to number 8.
I love that 8.
Steve McQueen's Rock. Which, we're not the biggest. Reverse Shot as a publication, it hasn't always been sort of like the biggest supporter of Steve McQueen. I mean, I remember writing about his second film, Shame, that was one of the worst films of that year in our offenses column. And so I was really surprised when Lovers Rock hit and everybody was sort of going crazy for it, and was really, really pleased by it, pleased by how loose it is, how organic it is, how sensual it is, how fun it is. Fun is something I would never have accused Steve McQueen of being in his films in the past, but it's really joyous.
Plays into all of his best strengths. I mean, the whole Small Axe series, of which this is a part, all of it is worth watching. I'm an Education, which didn't get a lot of talk because it wasn't in the first batch that was in the festival, is actually pretty great. But of the films, this one just stands out. It's almost like goes into pure abstraction at a certain point. The way that it takes place one night at a house party, and the way that it surveys the beauty of that night and that moment, and the togetherness is, especially in pandemic times, I found kind of unbearably beautiful.
Every moment of every one of these episodes is very intentional, thoughtful. You feel that one of the things I love most in movies is the idea of like the space between people being alive because of the attention on it. And that's how I felt about Lovers Rock in particular, that like it's so compelling even when nothing is happening.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right.
Moving on to number 7. This is one of my favorite of Steve's watercolors, by the way, just throwing it out there.
I'm a 9 voter so far. It's a foxy 9.
So number 7.
Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, directed by Eliza Hittman. And what an amazing film, and how delightful to finally have an Eliza Hittman film in the top 10. I feel like her other films have always been like hovering right beneath. It Felt Like Love and Beach Rats, we're very big fans. This is at a new level. I think she's an amazing filmmaker. This is a film that I watched basically right at the beginning of lockdown, and I was just in tears watching it. It's a brilliant film.
And it's another film that kind of got caught up in the COVID lockdown, and so it was planning to open right around that time. And I caught up with it on HBO, and I was glad that I finally did months and months later. It's a movie that makes a lot out of there's not a lot of dialogue in this film. There are events, but not many in a certain sense. It's 2 women who go into New York City to try and procure an abortion for their friend. It's in some ways not unlike it reminded me a bit of 4 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days, but it's so spare, but it still just feels kind of like bursting with life. And the main lead actress, whose name is escaping me right now, is just incredible.
Sydney Flanagan is the name of the actress. And she is, hopefully we'll be hearing a lot more about her. She's thankfully been winning some critics awards, and I thought that wouldn't happen because she's not well known, and people, like you just showed, people don't know her name. But it's the scene that gives the movie its title when she's answering the survey is one of the best acted scenes that I've seen in many, many years. So a great film.
Yep.
Moving on to number 6. How does this watercolor rank for you, Farihah, up against number 9?
You just can't explain when something moves you, Jeff.
Isn't that what we do as critics, though?
Sometimes it's just about the emotional experience.
Stop judging the watercolors and move
on. Stop creating so much suspense. Tell us what number 6 is.
Number 6 is Pedro Acosta's Vitalina Varela.
Yeah.
Which is just a terrific film. Maybe my favorite of his films thus far.
Probably the most physically beautiful movie that I saw this past year. It was one of those, every shot is a jaw dropper.
It's incredibly beautiful, but also I find it deeply moving, where oftentimes his films can be very abstract, somewhat austere by design. But this one, in in the study of its main character, I feel like there's a sort of emotional register that I don't know that things like Horse Money and Colossal Youth totally access in the same way.
I would agree with that. I mean, I'm certainly a fan of his work, but this opened up new emotional registers for me. I agree with that. I think it's on the Criterion channel right now, so people should watch it.
Yeah, it's a shame to see it at home, but if it's the only way to see it, just watch it. It is a special film. Number 5, big number 5. This is an exciting one. Very excited about this movie. This is a movie that when I saw it, I had not read. I'd seen the filmmaker's previous movies and loved them quite a lot, but had no idea what the plot of this movie was. And so it made the crucial turn to reveal what is actually happening. I was completely surprised. And the movie is Bacurau.
Yeah.
So I had no idea there was an element of this that was going to be violent, that was going to be a genre film, that there were hitmen involved and contract killings. It was a complete surprise to me. So it was kind of a thrilling moment to moment watch because of that, because I didn't know anything about it.
It's how the film should operate. You should go in knowing very little about it. And so it takes all of its crazy genre swerves and just have to once again push this movie that I talk about constantly, which was the previous film by Kleber Mendonça Filho, which is Aquarius, also starring Sonia Braga, who we see here, which I think is one of the great films of the decade. And this director, though he co-directed this with his art director, Juliano Dornelles, he's someone that we're going to be talking about for a long time. I'm just thrilled by his filmmaking.
And just to come back to, I think Sonia Braga deserves a second mention. She's so magnetic and transform. I mean, I know that is what the job of acting is, but it's kind of special to watch that kind of transformation happen. And I'm really appreciative that there's wider conversation in film circles and in out international film circles in because she's been incredible for a very long time, and I feel like she's having this renaissance in the last couple of years.
Definitely a moment happening for sure.
Yeah, very gratified by that.
Okay, moving on.
And she wears a bloody jacket like I've seen nobody do.
You would. I can tell by your red that you would wear it well.
Thank you.
Our number 4 movie is a film that, at least for me, it kind of snuck up on me in a certain way, and that I saw it and I liked it.
Good story.
But it's a
I liked it.
You can recognize the craft of it. It's doing something very specific. The filmmaking voice is it's super distinct. But then I just kept finding myself thinking about it months and months later, and thinking about the ways in which it worked and the ways in which it worked over me. And I was happy to see it land so high on our list. Is I Was at Home, but ...
Yes, by a German filmmaker, Angela Skanalek, who not everyone might know about, because even though she's been making films for a long time, this was her first American distributed release after all these years. Very interesting movie about grief and loss and domestic dissolution, but from a really strange, abstracted angle. A tricky film, but a really worthwhile emotional journey.
Okay. Number 3.
I like that 3.
This was another one that I think we were all really happy to see on the list, because I know we've all had very emotional experiences with this movie, which is Garrett Bradley's Time.
I will cry right now just thinking about it. I can't remember. First of all, we had the producer of this film, Lauren Domino, one of the producers, along with Kellen, on the show, which was really wonderful. I am just a huge fan of the work of the director, Garrett Bradley, and Lauren, and this team. And I think that when you've spent so much time sort of attuning yourself to your craft and to compassionate filmmaking, particularly in the documentary field, it shows. And this felt like this kind of swelling of incredible work that's been coming from Garrett for a few years now. I thought America last year. How is this the thing that follows up America 1 year afterwards? It's like unbelievable. That already felt like such an opus to me and such a brilliant piece of work. And this was almost, I had a rare moment afterwards of like, I have no words because what is there to say? I had an experience that, went beyond my ability to respond and critique for a period of time. I was deeply affected by this film.
And the rare case of a movie that functions on so many levels. It's a documentary. It's like it could be seen as an issue documentary that doesn't feel like one because it's so much about the people at the center. It has a kind of an abstract quality, even though it's actually very accessible. It just is it's perfect. What can I say?
Number 2. This is another first timer to the reverse shot list. And I don't know if we covered his previous movie in reverse shot at all. I kind of can't remember off the top of my head, but it was definitely, it's such a big, exciting movie that's trying to do so many things with archival footage and historical narrative and, big themes, big ideas, big dramas. So it only made sense it would land towards the top of our list. It is Martin Eden. Also New York Film Festival 2019, right?
It was. So I got to see it on big screen as well, so long ago. I think everyone now is just kind of like swooning over Luca Marinelli.
Yeah, just in this image, I mean, it's a little distracting.
Yeah, he is pretty hot.
He's certainly like a, art house sex god of 2020. But not in the last 20 minutes of the movie. It's pretty grotesque.
That's a different countdown. We'll come back to maybe when we reemerge from our healing cocoons, there'll be a art house sex god 10 countdown.
It was fun. I wrote about this for the top 10, which you'll read tomorrow, but it was great to revisit the movie and have a chance. It does some pretty wild things structurally and in terms of how it apportions the narrative and being able to kind of understand where it was going and be able to see that machinery at work. It's just a really special movie.
Yes. I think it's fun when we all have like one. I'm not going to say that I'm a detractor, but I don't know if I love it as much as everyone else. But I really enjoyed it, even the second time.
I mean, everybody knows that Tenet is probably the number 1, right?
Will you stop? Are there any guesses? Are there any guesses in the audience?
Yeah.
Before we click on it, let's see if anybody.
Days.
The Disciple.
City Hall.
Tenet. Yeah.
Chloe.
I mean, Chloe,
you're perverse.
Tenet was top of my list for sure.
Dick Johnson is Dead. Also great filmmaker that we had on. Great guess.
There are definitely some good guesses and definitely some disappointment out there.
Yeah, so some of you are going to be disappointed.
Hubie Halloween is also a joke that I will accept.
Well, not to prolong it too much, we have to bring on our guest soon.
Boom! It is, for all of you size stands out there. It is Days, which is just an excellent movie. God, he keeps being more amazing as his career goes on. This may be one of my all-time favorites of his movies. Yeah,
speaking of the feeling the aliveness between people on screen, I also think like the way that space and environment is depicted in his films is so distinctive to him, and it shows even in this still, which is also appropriate for our theme, which was nice.
Yes, I wrote about this one for Reverse Shot, so I'm not going to say too much about it because, what's the point? Except that I will say it was the first time we've ever had a Ming-liang film at number 1 on the Reverse Shot list, even though he's very clearly a huge favorite. We had a whole symposium on his writing early on, and his films have shown up in our list, but this is the first time he's been at number 1. And that just feels right, especially for 2020, a movie so much about connection during isolation, and it's just exquisite.
It is. So that concludes our top 10. There is no tie for number 1. There was only a tie at number 2. Those are our films, and we can put them all in the chat, and you'll also be able to see. Michael will be tweeting about the movies tomorrow as we launch our article that's counting down the top 10 with all the writing from our Reverse Shot writers. So thanks for bearing with us while we did this. We tried out the slideshow thing.
And now let's bring on our guests. You can choose to respond to this, but we'll move right into our discussion. And I mentioned them earlier, but I'll introduce them again. We have Mayukh Sen, who is a James Beard Award-winning food writer and a film writer. And we have Andrew Chan, web editor at Criterion Collection and film critic. Thank you so much for bearing with us during all that. Welcome.
No problem. Hello.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thanks for having us.
I feel like our guests have like a top 10 hair in film criticism countdown. That's what I am thinking about.
Top 10.
You look great on a Zoom. I'm glad to have you back.
We're so thrilled to have you here.
And again, particularly in a week where we're thinking about celebration and gathering, which I know we've touched on a couple of times throughout the year, but of course, part of why we put the show together to be able to be together and in some way.
Yeah, we should say very briefly, so we can finally stop talking and we can actually hear from you guys, wonderful patient friends. Because this is the last happy hour that we're doing for a while, going on hiatus, we wanted to talk about something very warm, which is gatherings and farewells on film. I know that sounds kind of like an obvious thing, but when you think about it, I don't think it's talked about very much. It's actually something really unique and special that cinema can do. Is not just, we talk about how movies bring people together, but literally on the screen, in the frame, a movie can bring people together. And so we were thinking about the best way of talking about that. And so we asked our guests what movies first came to mind as special to them that was reflective of this topic. And I guess who should we start with? I feel like we should start with one of you, obviously, but who's gonna volunteer?
I can go, I guess. Andrew's dying to go. Well, hello, thanks for having me. Can everyone hear me okay, I hope? My internet doesn't kick out. I have Spectrum and it's been sucking lately. So the movie that came to mind when you all floated this topic to me was Come Back to the Five and Dime, Jimmy Dean from 1982 by Robert Altman. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with the movie, but brief primer for those of you who haven't seen it. So it's based on a play that I think came out in like 1976 or something, or in the late 70s. And it takes place between 1955 and 1975 in a small town in Texas, in like a Woolworth's, like a five and dime store. And basically it's about a group of women who were part of this like James Dean fan club. I think they're called the Disciples of James Dean or something like that.
They are.
Yeah, and so they're reuniting to observe / commemorate the 20-year anniversary of his death. And so, it's a bunch of, wonderful actresses coming together in this movie. And the three main roles are played by Sandy Dennis, who plays a woman named Mona, Cher in her first really like a full body dramatic role, I'd say, and Chastity came before that, but I don't think that she really wants to talk about that probably. And I think a lot of people forgot about it for good reason. So Cher plays a woman named Sissy. And then there's Karen Black, who plays a woman named Joanne. And then there are also a bunch of other wonderful character actresses and actresses. Like Kathy Bates has a pretty small role in the movie, but it's a crucial one to my mind. Anyway, so, because it's based on a play, or rather, when you watch the movie, you can tell that it was based on a play. I think that Robert Altman doesn't necessarily try to kind of conceal those origins in any way. It's kind of, filmed in this really like, it has this kind of like gauzy look, the whole movie. And he makes use of mirrors to kind of, convey like, going back in time and all that kind of stuff, which is, it sounds pretty hokey, but it actually really works so beautifully. But it is very much kind of a performer's showcase. And so, part of the reason why I wanted to kind of talk about it is because, when thinking about gatherings, especially in the context of, last year and kind of its forced isolation and this year's forced isolation as well, until a vaccine kind of comes around. you know, I so like during the holidays, I was like really grateful, to be honest, to not have to see a bunch of family members, because I have such a complicated relationship with my family sometimes, and you know,
Mhm.
the gatherings like that kind of bring, you know, all those you know, kind of simmering resentments out, and so I was totally relieved to not have to be put in those kinds of contexts anymore. Last year, you know, one bright spot of an otherwise very difficult year. And this whole like dynamic between all these women in this movie, it's very much like, you know, family dynamic, and in that there's so much bickering, there's so much animosity and just kind of like lingering resentment between all of them. And, you know, like any good play, to all of it kind of carefully unspools over the course of like what, an hour and a half or something like that, 2 hours, you know. Lots of monologues, lots of shouting back and forth, etc. But I think that for the most part, you know, all of that, you know, conflict between characters is kind of undergirded by love, or at least in the three main characters who I just mentioned. And so, and I mean, the ending scene is so beautiful and kind of conveying that, you know, there's so much that happens, and you know, so many just like teary confessional monologues, and yet they kind of come together in this very beautiful kind of communal gesture. So I really appreciate the movie for so many reasons, you know. Sorry if I'm like talking too long, but you know, it is very much just kind of like all these roles are such a feast, no pun intended, for you know, the actresses involved. I think that, you know, like Cher has a really amazing, it's like a show-stopping monologue like near the end of the movie that is like the thing that just kind of lingers in my mind when I think about that movie. And it's so beautiful, and I won't spoil what it's about for anyone who hasn't seen it, but it's just this like revelation. And I think I read this like review of Burlesque once that was like, oh, Cher, like, you know, she has a voice of like a woman who's always about to cry or something like that. And I feel like that is totally like, you know, evident when you watch that monologue. So it's kind of lodged in my brain. Yeah, I don't know what else to kind of talk about with this, because there's so many reasons why I love this movie too, in addition to the gathering aspect. But sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, it's fine. I mean, I can just jump in and say that it's a favorite of mine as well. I've seen it many times and written about it, and I think what you're saying is so dead on about that film, which is that there's a lot of conflict, there's a lot of screaming, there's a lot of very stage-like, you know, vocalization of traumas and their past demons. But despite all that, it really gets at this sense of love, warmth, and togetherness. And by the end of that film, I'm so completely immersed in that world, and I can feel the love between these women. And it's just it's an amazing movie. And even those we were talking about, the way Altman uses mirrors, he uses them within like the same unbroken takes, and he has the actors kind of go to the other side of the set, and so they're playing the past and the present within the same take. And so they're behind this window that's supposed to be a mirror, but they're wearing the same clothes in the past and the present. So you have to kind of just use your mind to imagine that they're younger versions of themselves. So you're seeing like, you know, 40 something, in some cases women, being 20-year-olds. And it's so beautiful and perfect, even though it shouldn't work, and it does.
Totally. I really do think that it is a movie that should not work, you know, for so many reasons, because the whole conceit is just kind of, I don't want to say phony. That sounds like such a strong and kind of uncharitable word, but you know, it is very, it could go wrong in so many ways for so many reasons, you know. But I think that, you know, all of the performers sell it so beautifully. I think one other thing that I love so much, and Michael, you might relate to this, is just like, I love the whole concept of the movie about like, you know, having such affection for a performer in a way that you can't quite articulate. You know, I think there's this one line in the middle of the movie that I forgot to jot down, but I think Sissy Cher says it. She's like, you know, I love James Dean so much, and I can't even put into words like why I love him so much, that kind of thing. I think that, as you've written about in your column for Film Comment, and presumably are going to be writing about in the chapter on this movie in your book, you know, it's such a wonderful queer movie for so many reasons. This is a significant, movie in terms of queer cinema, both in terms of, Karen Black's character. So Karen Black plays a transgender woman, and as you wrote about in your column, it was really groundbreaking. Back in 1982, that role. But yeah, there's something that feels also queer about just kind of like developing this kind of intense, unyielding attachment to a performer, and like, I don't know, finding community with other people who share that affection. So I love this movie. It's great. It's on YouTube. Watch it.
I was really glad that you brought up an Altman film in general, like brought Altman to this conversation in general, because I think about him all the time as somebody who just like masterfully handles the ensemble cast and the idea of a story that has multiple entry points and how you weave in and out of people's stories. And I think you can't do that without without being able to hold so many threads at one time and understand like how community functions, and that we're a network of people and our stories live within that, and to sort of recreate that in a way that feels emotionally authentic, even through something that like really embraces artifice, like very openly embraces artifice, like in Come Back to the Five and Dime, Jimmy Dean specifically, is it's so impressive to me. And I think about his films in general a lot in terms of like the idea of being part of a community and missing that sense of gathering.
Yeah, I saw it for the first time when BAM did the Karen Black series, and I was just blown away. I really want to see it again after you just described it, because I don't remember a lot of things, but it was one of my favorite Altmans after I saw it.
I mean, her performance especially, sorry, I don't mean to, but her performance is just like spectacular. To me, it's like, one of my top 10 like performances on film ever. It's so just uniquely empathetic, and I don't think that she got a better role in her career than that, to be honest. Not even 5 Easy Pieces or whatever. So yes, definitely worth checking out. But I'll stop talking now.
No, I mean, I could hear you talk about it forever, but I do want to know what Andrew's, the first film that came to your mind.
So I chose Wayne Wang's The Joy Luck Club, which has a lot of feasts and gatherings. I actually wrote a piece for Film Comment a couple years ago about it. And during the process of writing the piece, I realized how hard it was to actually see this film clearly, because it's so deeply ingrained in my movie watching life. I saw it when it came out, so I was probably like 7, 8 years old, so way too young to be seeing a rated R movie. But for that reason, I mean, I used to know every line in the film by heart. And also over the years, it's been probably the only Hollywood drama of its scale that really has that size of an Asian American, all Asian American cast, and takes the Chinese American experience as seriously as it does, even if, I do have complicated feelings about some of the more stereotypical aspects of the story. It's something that it's a film that I feel incredibly sentimentally attached to. So yeah, when thinking about the theme of gatherings and feasts, it struck me that this particular film is one of the best representations of food as a coded cultural experience, and something that on the one hand is a source of comfort for a lot of people, but can also be used as a weapon. And the way you conduct yourself during a communal dining experience can actually sort of be used as a barometer of your moral character. And so for people who don't know what the film is about, it's about the friendships of these 4 middle-aged Chinese women who live in San Francisco, and their relationships with their daughters and the community that surrounds them. And really the only times that you see the 8 protagonists together in the same space is during these big gatherings where they play mahjong and they trade gossip and they eat a lot of food. And there are so many memorable scenes that are so just scenes that I talk about a lot with and reference with my family and my Asian American friends, but there is one particular scene that stands out for me when it comes to this theme of gatherings and feasts. And it's the one, and for anyone who's seen the film, I'm sure you remember it, it's when Waverly, one of the daughters, brings home her new fiance, who's this sort of good-looking, tall, corn-fed white dude to her family to meet him for the first time. And she knows there's a lot riding on this encounter, especially because her mother is really judgmental. And the scene sort of climaxes with her mother bringing out her best dish and sort of presenting it with a kind of false modesty. It's too bad to eat, but please. And then the dude says, oh, you know, all it needs is a little soy sauce. And then he just pours it all over the dish.
No.
And it's an iconic scene for me and for some other Asian American friends of mine.
I gasped out loud involuntarily as I remember the moment of that. And it's just about like a cultural disconnect where I'm like, this poor white man does not even know what he just did.
And then everyone's gasping and just like horrified. But it's one of those moments where I think it's so iconic for Asian American viewers, because even though it's pretty broadly farcical, it sort of touches on something that's really instantly recognizable as an experience for Asian Americans, but I'm pretty sure for a lot of people who come from immigrant communities, just that on the one hand, food is something that's easily shared across cultures, but it's also something that's so easily misunderstood. And when it comes to Chinese food in particular in America, disrespected, undervalued. And for me, even seeing this scene as a kid, just already I could connect it with experiences that I had already had with non-Asian friends of mine who had sort of felt weird about Chinese food, or, you know, kind of that feeling of feeling othered through the food that you eat, which is so normal to you, but to others, because of some misunderstanding, it becomes clear to you that you know, your food is requiring translation or customization for like a uncomprehending consumer. And so to me, it's one of those rare moments in an American film where, yes, food brings people together, but it can also be a source of misunderstanding, division, separation, because you leave that scene sort of thinking, well, if he can't even have the most basic, if he doesn't have the most basic capacity to understand their food and their emotional attachment to the food, then how can he ever be part of this community? Lo and behold, he marries Waverly, but but that's only one of several food and gathering and feasting related moments that are wonderful in the film. I mean, it ends with it makes me cry just thinking about it. One of the mothers trying to explain to her daughter, you took, what is the line? You took best quality, no, Waverly took best quality crab. You took worst, and that's because you have best quality heart. I mean, it's the best.
Look better. That movie has a special place in my heart because it's the only movie that I ever saw with my grandparents.
Oh, wow.
Like literally the only movie.
It was such a huge phenomenon.
Yeah.
1993,
really
which was a huge year. But to think that, to me, I mean, it's insane because the amount of Asian American talent in that film, and for it not to have been followed up with anything even remotely comparable until Crazy Rich Asians, which is not comparable, it's crazy.
Yeah, and I remember that an interesting thing, seeing it with my grandmother was actually very interesting. And literally, I had never been to a movie with either of my grandparents ever. This was literally the only one, on my father's side. She was so interested in it because she played mahjong. She's an old Jewish woman. They grew up in the 50s. She played mahjong her whole life because all Jewish ladies love to play mahjong. It was their number one hobby back in like the 40s and 50s. And so she was just fascinated by seeing that on film. She hadn't really seen it in a, going to the multiplex for a Hollywood film before.
Yeah.
First of all, I think it's so incredible when you can say about a film that it unites a number of experiences among your Asian American friends, because Asia is massive, and
Totally.
there
Yeah.
are ways in which all of our cultures intersect, and to see that reflected for so many people says something about the power of this film. And it's like getting at certain truths even under like layers of, even as a child watching it, there were things that I was like, oh my God, I get it, this is like a movie ending, and it's still like touched me really deeply. And the other thing that I'll say is I think it's the first film that I can remember like shaking me to my core in terms of thinking about my parents as immigrant people and people who had lives before me and lives before they, birthed me in this country. It really made me understand their life in a new way and like have a new renewed curiosity about their life. And I was pretty young, so that it made a huge impact.
And just the wide gulf across which the stories of the older generation needs to cross before it can be understood by the younger generation, and the same with the other direction. It's just it did the same for me. And I'll say, just to go back to the theme of food, that's not even the dominant theme in the film, but for it to just touch on truths about immigrant communities' relationship to their food, just in a couple scenes, and even little details in certain scenes that I remember. The way Auntie Linda, who's one of the main characters, the way she holds her chopsticks and almost as like a weapon, like it really helped me understand my family's own deep connection to food, and my own deep connection to this day to Asian cuisines.
Don't you love how movies can do that? There's so much more than, just things you watch. They get inside you, they become part of you. I mean, I remember Mayukh, we were on a film comment podcast together where we talked about food and film. And I talked a little bit about Crossing Delancey, which has had a similar effect for me in terms of like the cultural impact of what the food meant in that film. When you think of that film, I'm not sure a lot of people think of Crossing Delancey as a food movie, but for me it completely is, because I was seeing all of these specific Jewish foods on camera, shown often in many scenes that I had grown up seeing in piles and plates across rooms, for my whole childhood, my grandparents, my parents. And it means something. It has like a real connection to my past, and it helped define me a little bit.
I think because in that film, which I watched for the first time recently, I had seen all these other Joan Micklin-Silver films. I love Chilly Scenes of Winter because I'm just a diehard pessimist about life, I guess. And I'd never seen Crossing Delancey, and I watched it over the holidays. And I also, even seeing it now as an adult and not coming from that community in the same way, I think that, like Joy Luck Club, it's that the food is never, or it's like, it's too easy to say food brings people together. It's more that like there's all these generational issues and gaps, and in Joy Luck Club, like they have to hold that doesn't get resolved. Even in this big Hollywood movie, certain things they just have to sit with their discomfort and that they'll never really understand. And this is an area in which you don't have to fight, because they're like, growing up with this sort of like at least within one home, a political shared experience makes it a release, or like a release. I don't know. I also remember talking to a friend about how if this was set today, no one would be upset about being set up with the pickle guy. Like this was not a believable plot point for 2020. I feel like he owns a business. He loves fermentation. Like what's to
An artisanal pickle maker would be like the hottest thing. If only he had some weird tattoo.
What were you going to say, Mayukh?
Oh, nothing. I was just or I was going to say something. Excuse me. I was just thinking about the fact that Farihah and I have like pretty similar cultural backgrounds, but
Yeah.
I don't know that I've had that kind of moment like Michael had with Crossing Delancey or Andrew had with Joy Luck Club of like seeing my food on screen or whatever. And I don't know if Farihah any movies come to mind in that regard that have kind of done it, because I don't know.
I'm
Yeah.
trying to think of an American or like basically like a film within non-Desi context. Like it comes up in our films in Bengali language and Hindi and Tagal, South Asian films all the time because food is super important to the culture. But no, I can't think. I can think of examples where they're like, it's bhaji on the beach or it's ABCD, and it very
Exactly.
conspicuously sort of, there's usually a moment where someone's like, what's that? And they have to explain the food. And I want to go beyond that, where like the food can just exist without, having to be this like symbolism of bridging the gap for a Western audience. I can't think of it off the top of my head. I mean, what came to mind first, I think, because Jeff, Michael, and I virtually watched Sylvie's Love together, and Michael pointed out that it's the same cinematographer as Monsoon Wedding, and while that is a film that's set in India, it's mostly spoken in English. It definitely had a fairly big audience for like an independent half foreign language film at the time. I remember seeing it in art house theaters in the US at the time, and that definitely had a sort of unapologetic, like, this is part of almost every scene. I think that one of the children in this family that's sort of preparing for a wedding is on the young side and wants to be a chef. And it features this, because I actually grew up in Delhi between the ages of like 10 and 18. It features this celebrity chef from the kind of like local non-cable channel. And he watches because he's obsessed with learning. And, the parents don't necessarily think that's a good profession for him. But it was those references given without, like apology or explanation, that I think make the presence of the food in the film memorable to me.
Right. It's been years since I've seen it, although I think it's on the Criterion channel now. So
yeah, but we don't have a Joy Luck Club, and I think we deserve one, and our food certainly deserves a Joy Luck
think
Club.
it's up to you to make the movie. It's your time, man.
for our food and our matriarchs.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's a really good idea. I was going to say briefly that a movie that I thought of for this topic is one that I have mentioned before, though I've never talked about at length. And I won't now, but I will mention it because it means so much to me, and it is a cultural thing. And that is Avalon, which is Barry Levinson's movie. I'm not particularly a big Barry Levinson fan. I don't feel, I didn't have to, I guess, qualify that, but I just find so many of his films are just like so abhorrently bad. But this movie is so great and so special to me that it's kind of like, oh, thank God he was, put on earth to make this one great film. And it's just, but it's like so personal and so strange in so many ways that it's almost like a joke, like this, oh, was this movie actually somehow written about my family, and they just changed the words a little bit? Like, they're the Krasinski family. The grandfather's musician, my grandfather's musician. The father's a traveling salesman. My father's a traveling salesman. The kid's name is Michael K. That's my name. Like, the Elijah Wood character. Like, it's actually really weird. So I grew up watching this movie, and it means so much to me that it's almost like the people on screen, even though it takes place in Baltimore, I grew up in New England, the family on screen is like I'm watching home movies of my family. That's how close it feels. And it's incredibly beautiful and incredibly sad. And one thing I thought of is that it's about the kind of dissolution of a family in a way. Like as time progresses, it starts in the 50s, the family starts to kind of unravel and come apart. And, at the beginning, it's a big bustling family. At the end, it's kind of just one man sitting alone in a nursing home. And you see it gradually happen. But one of the breaking points comes because of a meal. It's actually, it's a Thanksgiving. It's kind of like a scene that starts like comedy, but then it becomes trauma. And this happens in families, these incidents that just kind of start to splinter families, where they cut the turkey before one of the uncles arrives at the meal, and he freaks out, leaves. And then as the movie progresses, it keeps coming up and factions start to appear in the family because of this incident that happened. So because this meal didn't go off the way it was supposed to, and they didn't wait for everyone to be there when they cut the turkey, it's kind of the beginning of the end for the family for generations. And it's sort of tragic and hilarious. And again, it seems like it happened in my family, but I know that it was just Avalon.
Babylon.
That's all I want to say about that. Move on.
I mean, I'll just to move in a lighter direction as we head towards the end of the show. Whenever, you know, the initial sort of seed for this episode was feasts, because our original air date was in fact the day which is the Feast of the Epiphany. We were thinking of how we released that movie pretty much right when we started doing the reverse shot happy hours, and it sort of fused for us and came to represent so much about what we love, and we're trying to sort of hang on to around being with people and gathering around food. And whenever we start to sort of think about this larger picture of like feast, but also celebration and gathering, like I immediately cannot help myself just think about party scenes. I'm obsessed. I guess like if I ever write a book, that's what it'll be about. And I was to force myself not to go in that direction because it is not feast oriented. I was thinking about like, well, when is there that's this same kind of like chaotic energy in a food specific scene? And I was thinking about like fantastical movies. So as opposed to sort of like realistic dramatic representations of our lives, which is also very meaningful to me, but like I think in Spirited Away, and in fact in a number of Miyazaki movies, that like where food takes on this sort of heightened physical and emotional expression in the same way that like love or sex can take on a heightened performance or depiction on screen. I was thinking about Daisies, or like the idea of the food fight, and how it's like such a release for me, because I am, like I'm sure many immigrants' children, very uptight about food waste. I don't like it, but I love to see it on screen. It like gives me such a thrill to see food like used as this like a weapon, or just, you know, some other kind of that holds some other kind of meaning besides like the weight of what we experience in terms of our family ties and our culture. And
I love that scene in Daisies. The last 10 minutes or whatever, more probably, of Daisies is just one of the great joys. Anarchy. It's one of my favorite scenes in film. I mean, I love that film in general, but it's such a perfect apotheosis for like the total logic and illogic that lives in that. But I want to highlight a very specific moment in a film that I think is fine, but that one scene I think about constantly, talk to my sisters about constantly. And it's in the Stephen Chow movie, God of Cookery.
I was just going to mention that.
Fantastical film sequences. I mean, the whole plot, which there's some problematic stuff around like women's appearance, ugly duckling shit, yes. But there is a great scene where the sort of aspiration is to be on and succeed in this cooking show, like an Iron Chef style competition, and the main character has been working towards it and trying to achieve a sort of transcendent moment through food and through the cooking of food. And apparently he gets there, and the way that they show this is that when the judge like takes a bite of the beef in his dish, it goes to this very quick fantasy sequence where she's very professionally dressed, wearing this like great skirt suit, but her fantasy is that the like beef is such an explosion of joy in her mouth that she is rolling around on a gigantic piece of beef. And I still think about this as like a way that cinema can convey an internal state that has no outward expression in our daily lives.
Yeah, Stephen Chow is amazing. And I would throw in there for depictions of food that are not about how delicious the food is, but more of an emotional expressionistic use of food. Tsai Ming-liang, any of his films where they're just like stuffing their faces, and it's not even that any of it. I'm thinking really of Stray Dogs, which is actually my favorite, where he's just like sitting, I think, on the side of the road and just stuffing his face with the boxed lunch. And it's just, you know, sometimes that's the only thing that can heal your soul.
Yeah.
Or maybe drawing a face on a cabbage and eating it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Jeff and I made a whole short film called
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
If you
Our
want to
first shot classic.
eat a whole apple while watching Ming-liang clips, then
So it looks like we're getting to the point where we would normally do our toast. We always end these with a toast, but we wanted to do something a little more special for our toast for our last episode. So Eric, if you're still there, you are.
Bear with me as you finish this. I'm going to be doing some stuff in the background, so just bear with us. It may take a minute or so, but go for it.
Mysterious.
What were you going to say, Michael?
Oh, well, we have a lot of our, I believe we have a lot of our loyal viewers, many from our reverse shot contributors and filmmakers and friends in the audience. And we would love to invite them on for our final, here's
I've been messaging folks to invite them, and maybe you missed it in the chat. It's a very imprecise way of doing this. If you're a reverse shot contributor or friend of the family, as it were, and you didn't see my message and you'd like to join us in this, please just send me a message in the chat and we'll get you on here. So just give me a second.
So it might take a little while. Oh, it's good to see you, Chloe.
It's a party scene.
Does everyone have something ready? Hey, Devika.
Hey, Devika.
Devika, legendary for once holding up a bowl, candle, pot. Oh,
the same pot.
Also, our hair
I
is
had to bring it
converging,
back.
Devika.
Gina.
Let's make sure we name everybody as they show up.
I've been
So
trying.
many great people.
Edo, Gina, Julian. Oh, like
Julian,
Julian's really prepared. Did you just make that martini? Max Carpenter, welcome.
Sparkling probiotic drink.
Very nice. This is actually, like I said, this is an orange juice. Do we have, this is just going to keep happening. It's very exciting.
Okay, just
Two, blast from the past. Welcome.
Oh,
Is it, Eric? How much?
we're still going.
Matt Connolly. Oh, this is kind of like
long.
Hi.
this is very special. I don't know what else to say. Like seeing these faces is very heartwarming.
Certain people I'm not finding anymore.
Maybe some people ran screaming at the thought. Oh, looks like Ryan Swen is going to come.
Okay, I'll get Ryan on there.
I know. I can see Ina out there.
I'm trying to find Ina.
Ina said she will.
I know, but she's no longer listed as an attendee. Sorry, this is no one wants to hear about this. Here we go. Yeah.
Can I just say you all look really good? Like you're all. There's Ryan.
Look at this lineup.
Very hale and hearty, and prepared and wonderful and brilliant.
Cheers from midnight, guys.
Oh, right.
There's Julian's in London. It's light there.
It's time for a martini. Looks like Ina has a martini as well,
What better to toast?
or something.
Happy hour.
A gimlet or something.
And I just want to thank that there's a number of people out there that have been joining us consistently, and I just want to really, really appreciate you joining us every week, and really, I speak for all for the three hosts. I think is that we see you out there, and I think that really gives us a sense of continuity that we look forward to you all being out there every single week. We've really, really appreciated seeing you there and joining in on the chat and yeah, dealing with the awkwardnesses of this format and all that.
It's been incredibly meaningful. This has been very rewarding. Just Farihah and Jeff, I can't imagine more wonderful partners in every way. Mayukh and Andrew, thank you for being on today. Thank you to all of you for coming, but I don't want to hog up the spotlight. Somebody else. Jeff, you got nothing? Farihah?
Thank you to Steve for those watercolors. That was so cool that you did that.
They were beautiful.
Great job.
And it is so good to see some of you I haven't seen in the flesh in literally years. I'm looking at you, Matt Connolly. You can't see that I'm looking at you, but it is wonderful to see your face.
It sure is.
And you're muted, but which is like, that's our world right now.
Right back at you, Jeff.
Well, thank you again, everybody. We will be back in some form. This has been a wonderful season of this in a difficult year. You've all made it better. So,
Cheers.
Cheers.
Be safe, everybody. Please take care of one another out there.
What's our closing song, Eric? What did we pick?
We went all over the place, Jeff. Are we what are we doing? All right. I'm gonna do the one that you said.
This is where Eric is going to like sign you all off little by little, so you know what it feels like for us every week.
I'm gonna make you all go away one by one.
I have to remember that you're not immediately muted and you shouldn't sing out loud to yourself in your house. That's my personal problem. Just a word of advice for other enthusiastic music fans.
Yes, please stay with us. I love seeing people out there remaining with us during.
You're gonna want to like move in your chair a little bit. Or should we have like going away movie chat? I don't know what else to say. I think the top 10 was pretty good. I hope that other people are.
Yeah, people like the top 10. And miss anything? Do we miss anything? Tenet, obviously.
Top